And welcome into the locker room with Gerhard Mathangani. I'm Chase Robinson. Great show. A lot of basketball talk. We'll talk a lot of March Madness coming up a little bit later on. But let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide losing in the NIT tournament. They went in. They've had a great season, went in expecting to make it far. But Creighton stopped them from doing that.
Yeah, not the first time these two teams have met in the postseason. Back in 2012, they met in the NCAA tournament. Creighton is a really, really good team. They're a really good team at home, and one of the things that Alabama ran into was just a very poor shooting game. Shot 28% from the field. They were out-rebounded by 13 by the Blue Jays, and we've seen this out of Alabama where sometimes when it rains, it pours. And they scored 19 first-half points, and that ended up just being the difference in the entire game because they just shot so terribly to start out. And Creighton is a very good basketball team. Both these teams, about 3 weeks ago for Alabama, maybe about 6 weeks ago for Creighton, were NCAA tournament teams.
Right.
And we just kind of seen the wheels fall off both teams, but in the NIT game when it actually mattered, Bama did not show up and Creighton did.
Well, let's move over to the Diamond now, the softball Diamond. The Auburn Tigers coming off a great weekend. They beat the #1 team in the nation, the Florida Gators, Monday night. They're sit at number 3 on the ESPN.com rankings now.
Yeah, they've been actually playing really, really well over the last maybe 2 weeks. They lost the first 2 games to Florida, really bounced back in that third game and avoided the sweep. But where they have been just absolutely dominant is at the plate. I mean, they scored runs after runs after runs, and they matched that with perfect defense. And this is a rematch of the semifinals last year, the national semifinal. And so Auburn last year, everything was new to them. The regional was new, and winning an SEC championship was new. And now this year, it is all about, can we build on the momentum we've had last year? So far, so good. I mean, the #3 team in the country, they just went toe-to-toe with the #1 team in the country and a team that's always been there, a team that's won national championships in the Florida Gators. So Auburn should be really, really well tested by the time the NCAA tournament comes around, when regionals comes around and the SEC tournament comes around. But as of right now, where they stand, they look really impressive.
Again, Florida sits at #1, Michigan #2. Auburn #3, and the Alabama Crimson Tide, who we'll talk about next, sits at #4 on the ESPN softball poll. And Gerhard, Alabama struggled a little bit this weekend against the LSU Tigers, went down to Baton Rouge. They were able to win 1 game of the 3-game series.
Yeah, it's one of the most incredible things is the gauntlet of the SEC. You really can't take losses with the same grains of salt that you do with other conferences, just because the conference is just so elite. And we've seen Alabama even play teams like Jacksonville State. They played them a couple of weeks ago at University Field. And they are, like you said, started slow, but they're finding the rhythm. And the more they find it, I think the more comfortable they'll be. And Coach Patrick Murphy is one of the best coaches, especially towards the end of the year, getting his team together. So it might be a situation where they're doing a lot of experimenting with their lineups and things like that. And so we'll see how they fare, moving forward. But Alabama's always one of those teams that you always have to look out for, and they'll be impressive and interesting to watch as we move forward.
And let's move over to the baseball field now. Jacksonville State, they're 10-5 on the season, 3-0 in the OVC.
Yeah, and they've started the conference season out really, really well. They got a sweep over SIU Edwardsville. And they play, Coach Jim Case always likes to play a very tough schedule early on. They played Troy earlier this year. Troy is a team that will do very well in their conference. And they play that hard schedule early, so that way when they get to conference play, they're ready. And so they have the losses that they have so far this season to really tough competition, teams that we'll probably see as we go deep into the postseason. But the key for JSU, I think this year will be pitching, and they have a lot of pitching. I mean, they have a lot of guys that they rotate in and out, and they don't rely on one guy to be their main guy. And teams that do that have that comfortability of having that starter that you can start on Friday or start on Saturday. But since JSU has a rotation, they can just go with the hot hand. I think that serves them later on really well. And they have Pascal Petrangolo, who was an All-American candidate last year. He's back in the fold now. I think the offense will come around, so JSU should be really fun to watch as conference play continues on.
We'll be looking forward to keeping up with all these teams here as we enter spring in the spring sports. We're going to grab a timeout. When we come back, it's all March Madness, so stay with us here in the locker room. Back here in the locker room, and this is always a very fun time of the year. You get to make your brackets and pick your teams. It's March Madness time, and the bracket came out this week. What are your thoughts on the bracket?
It's really interesting because this time of year we always talk about the snubs, the teams that should have got in, that didn't get in. I think by and large the committee got everything right. You can argue with teams like Syracuse and a couple others, but by and large, they got it right. And really, at this point, you're kind of splitting hairs. I mean, if you weren't good enough at this point, don't leave it in the committee's hands. So I really like the tournament field. I think that the teams that shared the number one spot all season long will now start to emerge as some of the teams that will do well in the tournament. It's all about, though, picking the right games if you're a picker or prognosticator and all of that.
Well, we're going to have some fun here on the locker room picking some games. We got about 12 games we're going to pick today, first round games here on the locker room. So we'll start it off here. Mickey's not able to join us here on the show, but we have his picks. So let's start here. The Connecticut and against the number 8 seed Colorado. Let's see, Mickey Shadracks, he went with the Huskies of UConn.
Yeah, so did I. The UConn is one of those teams that they were in this tournament 2 or 3 years ago as a 7th seed and won the national championship. Kevin Ali, Jim Calhoun, those guys are just great guys when it comes to preparing for tournament play. So I like the Huskies in this one.
I'm going to go with UConn as well in this one. Next up, number 4 Cal and number 13 Hawaii. Mickey Shadracks, he went with Cal.
Yeah, and we always see upsets in this 4-13 matchup. I don't think you see it here. I think Cal gets the win here, and they knock off Hawaii.
I will go with Cal in this one too. Next up, number 7 Iowa and number 10 Temple. Mickey went with Temple, the number 10 seed.
I also thought about Temple, but I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes. Oh, I mean, I thought about Temple in before the show started, and I like them now. This is one of those games. The 7-10 matchup is always that split game where I don't know if I actually love them or not. Iowa shoots the 3-ball really well.
Right.
And I just hope in Brooklyn they don't shoot it as well as they can. This is one I went back and forth on. I ended up going with the Owls.
I'm going to go with the Temple Owls in this one too. Next up, it's the number 8 seed St. Joseph and number 9 Cincinnati. Mickey went with the number 9 seed Cincinnati.
I'll also go with the Bearcats in this one. I think that they're gelling at the right time. Mike Cronin has a very good team. They play really good defense. I think they pull off the upset.
You know, these 8 and 9 games are always so hard to pick, but I'm going to go with Cincinnati in this one. Next up, the Texas Longhorns and Northern Iowa.
Northern Iowa always seems to find ways to win tournament games, and so we'll see who Mickey picked first. But I'll also go with Iowa. I just think that at this point of the year, it's all about getting confidence and getting upsets. And Texas right now with a new head coach and Shaka Smart, I think right now the ground is just so shaky for Texas, and Northern Iowa is sitting on a little more solid footing.
Mickey went with Texas. I'll go with Texas, the number 6 seed. Also, next up is Oregon State and VCU. Mickey went with Virginia Commonwealth.
As did I, and we talked about Shaka Smart, and Shaka Smart was at VCU, and he created a culture down there. He created a culture of just energy, manic, play great aggressive defense. It might look sloppy at times, it might look a little helter-skelter, but the VCU Rams, they play that same kind of defense with this new head coach. And so, honestly, I just think that this game could be one of those 7-10 games that ends up being a runaway for VCU.
I'm going to go with VCU in this one, too. Next up, it's USC and Providence. Let's see, Mickey went with Providence, the number 9 seed. Gerhard.
Yeah, this 8-9 matchup, as you said, is really tough. Andy Enfield is the coach at USC. That name might sound familiar because he used to coach at Florida Gulf Coast. He took the only 15th seed to the Sweet 16 a couple of years ago. I still think that USC is a few years away from that.
Right.
I think Providence right now has better footing in this tournament. I'll go with the Friars.
Well, so far, we've only had one that we really haven't agreed on. I'll go with Providence as well. Next up, West Virginia and Stephen F. Austin. And Mickey Shadracks, his pick went to the number 3 seed, West Virginia.
Bobby Huggins and this West Virginia team, they're called Press Virginia because they like to play press defense up and down the floor. I think they'll force Stephen F. Austin into way too many turnovers, and the Mountaineers get the win.
This is one I had the upset on my bracket. I'm going with Stephen F. Austin, good shooting team, and I'd like to see them beat the number 3 seed. Next up, we got Wisconsin and Pittsburgh. Mickey Shadracks, his pick went to Pitt.
Wisconsin was in the national championship game last year, and I know what everybody's going to say. They lost Sam Decker, and they lost Frank Kaminsky, and they lost their head coach, Bo Ryan. But the majority of the guys that were on last year's team are back. And so I just think that the natural carryover that comes with the confidence of the tournament and their tournament run last year will carry the Badgers into a win in the first round.
I'm going to go with the Wisconsin Badgers in this one too. Next up, the number 5 seed Purdue Boilermakers and number 12 Arkansas at Little Rock. Mickey goes with Purdue. Gerhard?
Yeah, this one is more of an emotional play for me because Isaac Haas, who used to play at Host Bluff, is now at Purdue. We covered him in high school. We covered him with the Eagles. We're also covering him with the Boilermakers. He's having a fantastic season so far. They finished runner-up in the Big Ten Conference. I like the Purdue Boilermakers not only to win, but to win big, and I like Isaac Haas to have a really good tournament starting with Game 1.
I'm going to go Purdue in this one too. Next up, number 6 Seton Hall and Gonzaga. Mickey's pick went with Seton Hall.
Yeah, and I'll go also with Seton Hall. And for me, they're hot right now because Seton Hall, has been a while since they've been in the Big Dance. I think last time they were here was 2010. But they beat UConn. They have beat Xavier. They have a lot of good quality wins under their belt. I'm really just going because they're just the hotter team going in it. Gonzaga, right now, they're playing really well. And, of course, they've been in the tournament for the last 18 years in a row. Right. So a lot of these guys all know about tournament experience. But I just think Seton Hall's got the hotter hand right now, so I'm going with Seton Hall.
I'm going to go with the number 11 seed in this one, Gonzaga, for the upset over Seton Hall. And finally, the last one we got, number 10, Syracuse and Dayton. Mickey's pick went to the Orange.
Yeah, Syracuse is a good team. They're a team that's always been here. Jim Boeheim's a coach that always gets his teams here. They play suffocating defense with that zone. I say all that to discredit the Cuse because I'm going with Dayton in this one. And the reason why is because I think that they're gelling at the right time. And we've seen, if you're a fan of Alabama, you saw them play Alabama earlier in the season. I just think that right now they're gelling. And a couple of years ago, they made it to the Elite. I think the Elite 8 or the Sweet 16 had a chance at the Elite 8. The Flyers right now, I just think, have enough to beat Syracuse, and Syracuse is not the Syracuse that they were with Carmelo. They're not Syracuse they even were a couple of years ago when they made the Sweet 16. I'm going to go with the Flyers.
I'm going to go with Syracuse in this one. A little bit of an upset there, but I'm going to go with Mickey and the Orange. And Gerhard, these are not all of the first-round games, but these are some of the big ones. What are some other ones that maybe stand out to you, some storylines that we're going to see here in March Madness?
The teams that win those play-in games, I like to see their progress. We saw VCU a couple of years ago go from the first 4 to the final 4.
Right.
So it can be done. Wichita State has now beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's one of the few SEC teams, one of the 3 SEC teams that are in the mix. Now that Wichita State is in, and Wichita State a couple of years ago they were the number 1 seed. They have all this tournament history in their back pocket. Their 2 guards are the guys that Van Fleet and I forget the other guy's name. He's a senior. They've won 122 games from their freshman year to this year. I like to see West Virginia and the kind of run they can make. I'm not going to say first 4 or final 4, but I think it's close. All
right. Well, we'll keep you updated here with all the picking games, and each week we'll have some more picks here on the Locker Room. We're going to grab another timeout. When we come back, it's the Locker Room Roundtable, so stay with us. And welcome back here to the Locker Room. Time for the Locker Room Roundtable. And Gerhard, is baseball season, spring training. The Braves, not exactly how they're wanting to go right now. 4-11 so far. I know it's just spring, but still, spring training kind of has an effect on your season.
For sure, and you're starting to see some of the things that go on at the beginning of the year because really the spring sets up opening day, opening week, opening month of the season, and you want to be able to put your best foot forward. You're not out of it by any chance or by any stretch of the imagination, but they want to build off last year. I mean, 90-plus losses last year, and obviously a key spot for them in the offseason was getting a lot of young pitchers, a lot of young guys in the rotation. So keeping those guys healthy will be huge. And then developing some of their younger guys as well that are in the program. They had a complete change of philosophy when they went and got big free agents and all that a few years ago. Now they're going back to the way that they used to do, used to play baseball. So I think it might be some growing pains early on.
Staying on the diamond, the Ohio Valley Conference announced that they will play the Ohio Valley Conference softball tournament right down the road here at the new Choccolocco Park in Oxford. great for the city of Oxford here.
2016, 2017 in May should be a really interesting time in Oxford. And I was talking to Don Hudson, who is the Parks and Recreation Director for the city of Oxford. He brought up a good point that Oxford is a town that loves softball. Fast pitch softball, church league softball, men's and women's. Softball is really big in this community. And I think the fact that you added Signature Field in that nice stadium, and all the OVC coaches wanted a neutral site stadium. That's one of the things that they all kind of pushed for, and they all voted unanimously to have it at a neutral site. One of the things that City of Oxford does for the OVC is that it takes the pressure off of the school hosting the tournament. And you add in the fact that it's a city that loves softball with that beautiful state-of-the-art park. This is a home run really in every stretch.
I was able to go check out the new park when Oxford High School played their first baseball game there Friday night. I was able to go. Beautiful facilities. I walked over to the softball field, checked it out.
Right.
Great baseball field. All around, it shows what the city of Oxford is building on, and to have this great park, have Oxford High School playing games there at this beautiful facility, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they've really invested a lot of money and a lot of time, and I think they've done so well. And another thing to look out for probably this time next year is if they'll get the baseball bid, because the baseball bid with Jackson, Tennessee will be up. And Oxford's already said they're going to put in a proposal. We'll find out if they get it or not. But the Jackson play has been there for 5 years. This will be the 6th year. Contract will be up. So if Oxford can get the baseball OVC championship and softball OVC championship, that would be really big. Another good thing about that softball complex is that there's 4 fields, and so they're able to play a lot of different games there. They'll play a lot of high school games there, as you said, with the baseball complex. So the city of Oxford not only doing a lot to get these games, but also doing a lot for the facility and for the community. And so we'll see how far it goes, but definitely a big home run for them. And
we'll see the 2017 Dixie Youth World Series over here
at
Oxford. To sticking with baseball, the Chicago Cubs, they've already been loaded. They added some free agents. Could they make another run to the World Series?
We're kind of seeing what the Yankees used to do back in the day. They would just get some of the top guys and they would go make a run. I like their chances of getting to the World Series. One of the reasons why is not really a lot of their free agent signings, because they do have a lot. They've added Jason Hayward, who was a former Brave, Ben Zobrist, who's played many games in the playoffs, as well as John Lackey, who played years and years for the Boston Red Sox. But I love Joe Madden. And their manager he has such a pulse on the game of baseball, really unlike anybody else that I've seen, maybe since Bobby Cox or some of Joe Torre, some of these guys that have coached for a long time, and guys like Tony La Russa come to mind too for the St. Louis Cardinals. He has, I think, what it takes. And then you add his expertise on the field with the GM Theo Epstein off the field, and they're able to put together a good roster. Now, the players will have to execute and the players will have to play ball, but I think they've built what it takes to win a World Series championship.
Well, let's move over to football now. We've seen a lot of the news about Johnny Manziel. He was dropped by the Browns. Colin Cowherd of Fox Sports came out this week. He said Johnny Manziel sabotaged himself to get himself out of Cleveland. Is he onto something here, or is this... Could that be it?
It's interesting. It's worth debating. There's a lot of people who will kind of take a slight at that, mainly because it seems like a lot of Johnny's problems are substance problems, and you kind of want to tread carefully when it comes to that, because if they are substance problems, you don't want to brush them under the rug of he just wanted to get out of Cleveland. But let's just take his premise for just a second. It'd make a lot of sense, because Cleveland has not, look over the last 20 or 30 years, you could tell he did not want to go there in the first place. And a lot of the shine of the city of Cleveland with the Indians having a decent year, getting LeBron back, a lot of that's just kind of rubbed off. And Cleveland is just not the hot spot anymore. And we all know Johnny likes the spotlight. And there was a lot of talk about maybe Dallas. And Jerry Jones loves him. And he could be the Cowboys quarterback, because Tony Romo, his days are numbered, and he continues to get injured. So I think there is some credence in that, but I think we want to make sure that we kind of get all of those skeletons out of the closet, just to make sure that it's not something deeper here with Johnny, and this would have happened whether he was in any city, in San Francisco or Atlanta or Miami or wherever. But I think it's an interesting point, and we'll learn more about Johnny, and especially the next place that he goes, because he'll get another shot. He's an NFL talent. He'll get another shot, but we'll see if he bounces back in a little better light, so to speak, coming back from Cleveland.
Our team's going to still be as hot after him because of all the surroundings of him?
No, I don't think so. If he were a tight end, maybe a safety, maybe a wide receiver, maybe as a quarterback, those guys are few and far between, good quarterbacks.
Right.
They'll put him on a roster, and he could be a third-string quarterback, and third-string quarterbacks, you know, a lot of times don't travel with the team, but they'll be in the system. He'll know the system. He's an NFL talent with an NFL arm, and he's proven to win games in the National Football League.
Right.
Very few quarterbacks do that. So you don't want to just brush off everything, but he's not the Johnny Manziel of Texas A&M, and he can't replicate that on the NFL level. Now, GMs will recognize that. They'll try to get him on the cheap, which they can now that Cleveland's ousted him. And we'll see, because he's already proved he's not a first-round talent.
Right.
And now you could say, quote unquote, he's a bust. And so now all the rebuilding is on him. And that whether he goes the CFL route, whether he tries to make it with another NFL team, we'll see. But I just think that GMs right now, they're going to play it safe, and they'll say, we'll take 2 or 3 guys over you, and if you can come in and earn your spot, we'll let you in.
Well, that'll be interesting to see. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's edition of The Locker Room. If you want to check it out another time, there's several times you can do so on Thursdays and Fridays. So you see 3 great times on Thursdays and a couple times on Fridays. And, of course, on demand at TV24.tv. And check us out on Facebook, The Locker Room page, and on Twitter at The Locker Room 24. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be back here next week in The Locker Room.